We've got one more highlight coming. Luisa will join us on stage to drill down a little deeper into this conversation. Luisa, please join us and give her a warm welcome. Hey. It's good to have you, Luisa. Thank you for your time. Luisa, as probably many of you already know, has been one of the lead organizers of Fridays for Future in Germany and also globally, and brought hundreds of thousands of people into the streets to protest climate change. And in 2021, you were also part of a landmark constitutional court ruling against the German government on climate action. You're an author and many other things, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. Luisa, let's start off with also examples. Make it real for the audience a little. Where do you think climate change and cities go together? Or is that even a stupid question because it's it's the same thing for you anyway?
So I wouldn't say it's a stupid question, but no, I mean, there are so many things, but I find right now as the world is basically on fire, and in many ways quite literally. And we're seeing that having elected clowns results in politics becoming a circus in many ways. And the anti-climate, anti-planet, anti-existence movement rising everywhere. We need to be very strategic and pragmatic on where we organize change, how we protect lives, how we get people together. And as we see that in many democracies, especially Western democracies, that a few years ago used to be some of these, green spaces-ish, politically spoken, the wind has shifted. Not everywhere and not as dramatically as we sometimes read about it in the news, but it has. So the less we can rely on, for instance, national governments to deliver, the more we hear the talking about suddenly, a new flexibility arising about how much existence do we really need, how much do we actually care about constitutional court rulings. The more we see that on one end, the more we need to find other ways to move forward. And I find cities, smaller and larger ones, are one of the most hopeful things we got to our hands right now, because these are not only the places where the majority of people live, and also the places where a lot of the problems are being produced, but also the spaces where change can be, as we just heard here, where change is not theory, but something that people live in their everyday life. And I would say these days, we need people to get in the best way radical about taking on the cities that we live in and making them these stories that we then can tell, replicate, and use all the way in these dark times.
Thank you. In earlier conversations, we spoke about the city structure enabling or stopping democratic participation in climate change, and we used the example of 15-year-olds and the spaces that they would find to come together, organize, discuss, engage democratically for climate protection. Can you speak a little bit about this idea of the city being a political sphere that has space for some, maybe not space for others? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so when we talk about cities, and I think we just had this remarkable conversation about city transformation, and yet one aspect that often goes unnoticed is that cities are an emotional space too, and they are they define and they organize ownership. So what do I mean? I grew up in Hamburg. It's the second largest city of Germany. It's a quite prosperous space. So it's a city that profited enormously from colonization. We've got a big harbor. It's really this imperial well-being is quite visible there. And it's a very beautiful city on the other sides too. And So I grew up in the city that didn't lack resources. And yet it was so normal for me to not be able to swim in the river. It's the River Elbe. It's one of the largest rivers of Germany. And it was obviously impossible for us to swim in that river. And I would assume that most people here in the room have this childhood memory of going to the woods or playing at the beach or going to the grass thing. And there's a specific feeling if that field, that forest, or that river is inviting you, or if it's a no-go place for you. So we knew we could play at the beach, but we couldn't touch the water because we were told it's dangerous, it's toxic. And it was toxic. It is today. There's still no swimming in that river. I remember cycling to school, and I would even think most people in the room remember, or if you're still going to school, you remember very vividly how your infrastructure is working for you or against you. So I was on a bike, but we didn't have a bike lane. So all of us, hundreds of children, every single morning, we would compete with the cars on a big road on our way to get to school. And it was very obvious that we had to fight this fight every single morning. And later on, when we started the climate movement, a lot of the people that wanted to join us couldn't join because our cities weren't, in Hamburg and now where I live in Berlin, our cities weren't designed so that the children could get to places that were available to us easily. Because we would have public spaces for organizing, but they would be central. That's not where the children live in their families. They live on the suburbs, they live outside, they live, less well connected. So some of the biggest drop-off points were the fact that the infrastructure didn't match the space that we as young people or as children needed. And here two things come together. One is, how is the city putting you into a place where you feel ownership? Are you growing up in a space that invites you to consider, is this working for me or against me? And also, how much empowered am I to do something about it? And if the entire town or city is telling you, stay at home, don't go away, the public spaces aren't for you, they are great for cars, but if you don't drive a car, well, sorry for you. And please, go back and do your homework. We're training an entire education into this urban apathy where we consider a city to be nothing else but steel and asphalt and consumer choices, and not a place that evolves with us, in us, and that ideally we make our own too.
Yeah, I love how you bring that framing of emotional geographies into the conversation and transformation requiring ownership, but ownership requiring an emotional connection. Do you have examples or thoughts around how that emotional connection can emerge and what we can do to create that?
Yeah, so I think when we talk, and it's really touching the activism that I would usually do, where I would think that organizing for urban change and say organizing climate movements, it's quite a similar task because it is not enough to talk about the problem. So most people will know that there's a problem in the place that they live. It's a pollution problem or car problem or both, or fossil fuel dependency problem, or they're cutting down all the tree problem, or my child can't go to school safely because everyone cares about the safety of cars and nobody cares about the safety of children. All of that knowledge about the problem is usually quite prominent. And then even sometimes I would say there is an awareness about solutions. So we hear these great stories about Paris, about London. We hear how, the mayor, probably people saw it in the news, the Paris mayor got elected and, jumped on the bike, and we're like seeing this in the news. The problem is, though, that talking about the problem on the one side or talking about the solution on the other side misses the most important link. It's talking about what can we do between those things. And missing that, like ignoring the moment where we get into action, means that eventually we're going to go very well informed into either doomism or happy sunshine fake optimism, where we pretend everything is going to be fine because we do have the solutions. But the uncomfortable piece in the middle, where we say, okay, well, what are we doing now? That's a task. And this is not about knowing necessarily we can change something, but experiencing how this works. And this is where, in my school, now they introduced a cycling lane, because children went to the local municipality and asked them and said, can't you do something about us? I didn't do it when I was in school, but they did. Because in the wake of Fridays for Future and all of that, they were looking at their bike lane or the missing bike lane, being like, okay, actually we can do something about it. In the very same manner, we won a huge referendum in the city of Hamburg, voting for a more strict climate law in times of a climate backlash just a year ago, with people saying, well, can't we make it better? Can't we make it nice? Can't we make it more just? Can't we make it more equitable? And shouldn't we just pretend that this could be really good and then act like it? So I would say each and every one of us has been seeing the small transformations where people didn't just see problems and solutions, but saw the space to step up. Yeah.
And I think beautifully relating to the example that Christine made of the city of Munich, where they go into neighborhoods and really involve people where they live in very small projects just to get started and give them that agency that I think shines through your argument here as well. I want to turn the attention a little bit away from the citizens that get involved in that positive transformation and mention something that stuck with me when we spoke earlier, with you mentioning the people who are actually ultimately responsible for bringing about that transformation, the bus drivers, the folks installing the heat pumps. You've mentioned the example of the Verdi Bus Driver Alliance that has formed around it. Very broadly asking, what are your thoughts around that, and are we missing a crucial group of stakeholders in this conversation sometimes, which is the message that I took away from it?
Yeah. Can we do a quick show of hand? Who here in the room thinks that more electric buses in cities is a good idea? Yeah. And who thinks that this should be like super affordable for everyone? Yeah. That's what we thought too. In Germany and in Berlin in particular, but also in other basically towns around the country, we're like, we do the bus driving thing, it must be super cheap so people can do it. Maybe you've heard about it when the energy crisis hit in Germany. We had a very curious moment in German politics where I think almost by accident for 3 months, they gave us all a public transport ticket that cost €9 for all public transport for an entire month. All public, and this means you can take regional trains. You can go, you have to bring the time, but you could technically go through the entire country on regional trains. €9 a month. It lasted 3 months. But until today, they tell us that the fossil fuel subsidies that we have now for more than 100 years, we cannot take away. Anyhow, we had this big rise and people getting super excited about public transport and the affordability. You know, bringing freedom, connecting the grandmothers on the countryside with the great-granddaughters living in the cities. You know, making sure people can actually go and see that friend they haven't seen in a while. Well, and we got really excited. And we didn't really. We decided too, bro. And you sit there in the bus, you're like, man, this is really nice. And and we just didn't think about who's driving these buses. And what is happening to those guys who suddenly have to drive many more buses, and as we're not paying more for the public transport, obviously don't benefit from it. How is that going to work out? And I would say it's one of the biggest lessons learned for me when it comes to the actual transition, that if you don't listen to people, outside the space where we organize, we can actually mess up. And what we found when getting together with these unions who organize the bus drivers in Germany, we found out that in Germany say the shit is cooking, but it was really bad. It turned out because of the higher frequency of the buses, because we needed more buses, they took away the breaks for them to go to the bathroom. So in between, running one line, taking a new bus, going the other direction, they couldn't go to the bathroom. They couldn't pee. It would meant that we had enormous amounts of bus drivers going into burnout because they could do it for a few months. Because they had to cut funding and they wouldn't have more money. They would close the rooms where they could hang out on their breaks and socialize. All of these things that are very much not included in any idea of a just transition. Yet the bus drivers in Germany just didn't really have the lobby because people wanted the buses. So, they couldn't argue that people wouldn't come otherwise. People would take the bus even though there's a bad deal for the bus drivers in it. Mm. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's do it together. We want the clean buses. We want people to get on the bus, but we want the bus drivers to be well paid. that sounds really romantic. It turned out that the average bus driver in Germany is an older, grumpy man that has gotten very sick and tired of climate protests because we are standing in the way of the bus lanes. And I would say we had a bit of a challenge, in the beginning of that alliance, because we found, we don't know each other. We don't know each other's lives, and we had just heard about each other. Everyone has met this grumpy bus driver before that closes the door right before, you're running there. You're like, oh, that's not my friend. And suddenly we were supposed to campaign for each other. And they, on the other side, were very skeptical if we would actually know our ways around. And then we realized, change travels in the speed of trust. So we had to build trust over months and months and months. We would meet decentralized across the country. We would hang out. We would show up for each other. Coming all the way to a point that some of the really grumpy bus drivers, usually men really, would say that they still don't trust the government, but they would now trust the climate movement, which is as far as you could possibly ever get on that level. And on this one beautiful moment, just 1.5 years ago, we organized the entire union of bus drivers and their buses to climate strike together with the entire climate movements, showing up on the streets, decorating the buses together, making sure we could do all the union strike elements with the vests and with the sausages that you make for the people to get and the little pretzels, but bringing the climate strike elements in it, having the music, having the rhythms, having the protesting, organizing for them to get the loan, to get the better pay, better conditions for working, to get more buses, and to actually get a chance for people to get on the public transport, for people to be able to afford it, and for the bus drivers to benefit in it. And I would say it's a battle that is still ongoing, but we've gotten further than we ever thought. And until today, for me, that's the most utopian thing we ever did in Germany.
I can imagine. Beautiful. Beautiful example of how everyone and taking everyone on board really needs to mean everyone and not again seclude and only take on board a couple of stakeholders. One final and one of those very big questions. Anything you want to leave the audience with for today? We've got about a minute or two.
Guys, I don't know about you, but it's we've started this movement 7 years ago, and there were times when everyone was talking about climate, and now we see that some of those who were like really big everywhere, they are now very flexible when it comes to hanging in there. And we see how people and parties and companies are dropping off, how the funders who were like really there to like support the young activists are like so very much not there anymore because they suddenly found, we've other things to care about apparently than our only home and the justice on it. And I do find it's getting very difficult these days to not very challenge a lot of the things that have been said in the last years, and to not also buy into this mindset that the time for the climate is over. And I do find that those, though, and I guess this is people in the room because you're still here, even though you could be talking about, I guess, other issues, I find it so crucial that we understand and that we bear in mind that we tell us it is important to talk about the climate and to do something about it when everyone else is. And it's so much more important to hang in there, to do something about it, and to care about it, and to talk about it when not everyone else is. And this is a team. We are the ones who are showing up in these hard times. And we're doing it not just because we have nothing else to do and we have no friends. We're doing it because we have no other choice. And we're doing it so at some point it can get easier again. It can get lighter again. It can get brighter again, and we can win again more often and more frequently. And this is why, for me, this is the realest, the most authentic time where we really see who are we, where are we, and what we are doing. And eventually, people are going to be there again, and the talks are going to be there, and the media is going to be there. But until then, it is our actions every day, it's our commitment, it's our willingness to fight that decides how likely a new momentum will be, how soon it is going to come, and how much we're going to win with it. So everyone, please, I just, invite us again to show up for this wonderful, beautiful planet and this amazing community of people that cares every single day and that counts on us to do so too. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm actually just going to leave this as the final statement. Thank you so much, Luisa, and thank you to the wonderful speakers before you. And thank you, everyone, for investing your time in this session. I hope you can take away something. Thank you.